Welcome to the Rotary Club Milwaukee. I am Club President Darren Miller, President and owner of JM Construction. As we gather virtually today, we will open with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we go to our invocation today, we will take a moment to remember fellow Rotarian Candy Hennessy, President and CEO of Curative Care Network, who passed away from cancer this last Thursday. I'll read a few sentences from her obituary. Candy was exceptionally successful in her career, and most of all, because she empathized so very much with the patients, clients, and caregivers on the front lines. No matter what her job was, Candy made daily rounds, attended work celebrations, and gave and got lots of hugs. Everyone knew her by name. Candy, not Candace. Thank you, Candy, for all the work you did to make the world a kinder and gentler place. Her obituary will be linked in this afternoon's survey email. And now, Karen Hung, founder and CEO of Silver Rock Consulting, will give our invocation.
Thank you, President Darren. It's great to see everyone virtually today and be part of this meeting and part of this organization. I am so excited to hear our speaker today. I have such tremendous respect for Chancellor Mone. And in honor of the Chancellor and with a long-term view on societal impact, I'm sharing 3 quotes on education for our invocation. The first one from Benjamin Franklin: "An investment in education pays the best interest." Albert Einstein: "Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think." And Nelson Mandela: "Education is the most powerful tool which you can use to change the world."
Thank you, Karen. I know we're all looking forward to today's program. Now for a bit of club business. The months of the pandemic have been challenging for many of us, and the Rotary Club of Milwaukee has had to make a few accommodations. Some have been difficult, and we've been gratified to hear many of our members tell us that they believe in Rotary now more than ever, a theme that you're going to hear more and more about over the coming months. Over the next few weeks, we will feature video clips from fellow Rotarians in our emails and programming. We'd like to share a couple of those clips today. First, from Saj Dachinkari, Marketing Director at MSOE, and Leah Fiasca, Director of Development at the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. Michelle?
Part of the reason was other Rotarians that I'd met throughout my career who always spoke very highly of it. My dad was a former Rotary president, so a couple of subtle nods, and then a good friend who encouraged me to finally take the step. I think it's kind of selfishly having those connections, right? And being able to access that network of people for personal needs, for professional needs, for really helping advance what MSOE is trying to do. But it's also a point of pride. I think, when my dad still wears his Rotary lapel pin, at 86 years old, every time he leaves the house. I feel the same sense of pride when I put that pin on, and I'm proud to be part of Rotary and be active in Rotary.
I started Rotary is actually the same reason that I believe that now is more than ever an important time to stay connected with and through the networks that Rotary provides. One is that, of course, that it provides an outlet to connect with really outstanding individuals throughout our community. It continues to provide really relevant programming and information that helps me be both a better person in my job, but also just a better person in general. And then the third, of course, is that in this important time, being truly connected to people in meaningful ways is something that I think we're all craving, and I find it to be an incredibly enriching experience every single time I'm at a Rotary program, a Rotary meeting, or bump into Rotarians in a different venue or place.
Those are great. Thank you to Saj and Leah. Now is a great time to join Rotary. So if you know somebody in your network who might be interested in Rotary, we believe it's the perfect time to introduce them to our work and our programming. Consider inviting them to join an upcoming virtual Tuesday meeting, a Thursday snack program, or connect with them to show how Rotary has enriched your life. And as a pandemic special, the admission fee will be waived through the end of the year. Rotary is also a proud sponsor of the Milwaukee Film Festival. And this year we're sponsoring the film We Don't Deserve Dogs. This heartwarming documentary asks why humans have earned the unconditional love that dogs give us. The festival runs until this Thursday, October 29th, and you can choose from nearly 200 films. A great form of entertainment this fall. We have a few select free ticket vouchers and discount codes. So if you're interested in one of those, please contact Michelle. This Thursday, our snack program, we will welcome Andrew Hunt, Director for the Center of Real Estate at Marquette University, to discuss the impact of COVID-19 and real estate. This coming Thursday, October 29th, the Beer Connector will gather at the new Explorium Brew Pub, which is at 143 West St. Paul Avenue. That will happen at 5:30 p.m. And the group is taking advantage of the heated patio to allow for social distancing. Contact Scott Glidden or check out the Facebook group for more information. One of the benefits of having virtual programming is that we have access to programming and presentations for a worldwide audience. The Rotary International Action Group for Microfinance and Community Development is hosting a program this Thursday with Nobel laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus. He is the father of microcredit and social business and will discuss economic justice during and in the aftermath of COVID-19. The program will be at 9 a.m. over Zoom. See the link in this morning's email for more information. Our second discussion for our fall book read, Things That Make White People Uncomfortable by Michael Bennett, will take place tomorrow at 4 p.m. via Zoom. We would like to say a thank you to Paula Pennebaker for leading these discussions. If you'd like to join the conversation, please email Michelle at the Rotary office for more information. Finally, if you're joining us on Zoom or YouTube today, please use the chat function to submit your questions. And now, Rotarian Kaushal Chari, Dean of the UW Milwaukee's Lubar School of Business, will introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to introduce today's keynote speaker and the Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Dr. Mark Mone. Since his appointment 6 years ago as the leader of the largest university in southeastern Wisconsin and the state's second largest university, Chancellor Mone has put UWM on a strategic course for student success, research growth, and partnership, and entrepreneurship and innovation, all while managing unprecedented challenges facing higher education. His leadership has been tremendous. I would particularly like to call out something that all of us in today's session can rally around: Chancellor Mone's strong commitment to deepening the university's positive impact in the city and region through community and business partnership. Through this work, UWM engages with numerous partners on community-driven research, educational and research collaborations, contributions to economic development, and influence on cultural and environmental quality of life. In fact, under Mark's leadership, UWM has been named among the nation's top universities for community engagement by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. I'm now pleased to welcome my boss, Chancellor Mark Mone.
Well, thank you, Kaushal. Dean Chari, you've done just a terrific job leading the Lubar School of Business. We're so proud of you. And I want to say good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me. It's just a special opportunity to spend time with Rotary, fellow Rotarians. And, as I said to some folks before the program, I can talk about UWM all day long. I also want to acknowledge the great work that so many of you in the community are doing on so many fronts. It's so critical for us to stay strong, stay healthy and safe. And I'll talk a lot about that today in terms of what we're doing at the university. But so many of you are leading such important organizations, have such valued roles, and keep Milwaukee moving forward, and really the state of Wisconsin staying as strong, a significant impact on all of us. And what I mean by that is, if we go to the next page, I'd like to show you the magnitude of what is really of concern. What I'm going to talk about is first the stats and some initial overview. I won't get too much into numbers on this slide, but I do want to share what I think is a high impact slide. I'll talk about COVID, not a whole lot. Like most of our students and faculty, we just want to move through this and continue learning, research, and engagement. But I do think it's critical to talk about what is at stake and what's at risk for so much of us by talking about higher education. And I especially appreciate Karen's comments at the beginning. And Karen, I'm so much a fan of yours and everything. And this is just another example of how you position yourself for the presentation and audience. Those quotes were spot on. I cannot think of a better investment. And it's not just because I'm biased and part of higher ed. I spent a decade in industry beforehand and always acknowledged and know the role that we have, the necessary strengths that make our economy, that make us able to have the democracy that we have, and so forth. So I'm going to end on that note as well in terms of our contributions, and then open it up for any questions. So Michelle, next slide, please. Here's an interesting picture. There's only one of us in the state of Wisconsin. What do I mean by that? We're in R1. We're in the top 2.5% of research universities in the country. Why is that important? Think about the new technologies in healthcare. Think about whether it's dementia, heart health, other issues around epilepsy, Parkinson's, obesity, smoking cessation. We have cutting edge researchers that are working in those areas. Think about smart manufacturing and the types of things around data science, Connected Systems Institute, other activities that create smarter jobs that keep us competitive, that enable Wisconsin to maintain its top manufacturing status. We can talk about fresh water. We can go through the types of issues, whether it's in terms of water security, water cleanliness, water availability, or threats and risks on so many different fronts. Our future is water. Only school of freshwater science in the country at the graduate school. So we only have one urban research university that also has an access mission, and that is really critically important. Thinking about the diversity dimensions that I'll mention in a moment. Our enrollments have been challenged. We, in 2010, had enrollments of almost 31,000. Today, we're barely at not quite 25,000. And that includes our 2 additional new campuses that are at UW Waukesha and UW Washington County. We have proportionately about a little more than 80% of our students from Wisconsin. And the neat thing is a majority of not only those students, but more than that many stay in Wisconsin after they graduate. If you drop to the bottom line, what does this mean for us? We have 191,000 alumni, the majority of whom have stayed and continue to remain in Wisconsin. I oftentimes joke, I can't figure out why post-retirement not everybody stays in Wisconsin, but we got a little flavor of that yesterday with a little bit of the snowfall. But I'm a 4-season guy, so I still can't quite figure that out. I do want to circle back to those other slide comments, though, those stats. First generation students, 36%. As a first generation student myself, I completely appreciate the role of public education, affordable and accessible. It's critical and even more important in the future. Students of color, more than 1/3 of our students are of color. And I will be the first to tell you, we're proud of that. It's an Access University's mission, but we also have to do a better job at having all of our students graduate. And that's why the Moonshot for Equity, a partnership that we just announced nationally last week, is essentially important. We have a 10-year goal of complete elimination of the achievement gap, which is too chronic across higher education in this country. And you may or may not know that Wisconsin has the greatest achievement gap in high school in the state. We're the 50th out of 50 states for African-American versus white high school student graduation gaps, and we're 43rd in the nation in terms of Hispanic students. Unfortunately, that continues into college, so we've got to do a better job. And I can share with you some stats that would just underscore the severity of this and why we're so proud to be working with the Hispanic professionals of Greater Milwaukee, Milwaukee Urban League, Hispanic Collaborative, and many other organizations on exactly these issues. Our graduates this year we're 2,000, I'm sorry, last year we're 5,000. But I want to tell you that we graduate 5,000 students every year. Think about what a boon that is for the state of Wisconsin to be able to have that kind of talent: nurses, engineers, computer scientists, name the profession, whether it's artists, governmental leaders, and so many others. That's what Wisconsin needs, and that's what we're really helping do. Next slide, please. So COVID-19, no surprise here. I'm not going to go through all these bullet points, but you'll have the slide deck. You're certainly welcome to it. And I have to tell you, we did a pivot. We were one of the first universities in the nation to make that pivot very quickly. We did cancel spring break, and we came back and we flipped over 6,000 courses. We've put a lot of our faculty through additional training, but I can tell you that we were already the largest online educator in the state of Wisconsin. That gave us a nice basis from which we could pivot. It was a challenge. Students had to learn a lot, faculty and staff had to learn a lot to do everything online, but we made that pivot and we got through the semester. Next slide, please. Next slide, Michelle. Thank you. Oops. So in terms of where we are today, what we did is we pivoted to the fall as we planned through the summer, and we basically went about 59% online. I'm in the top left part of the slide, 22% in person, 19% hybrid. How did we get there? We really followed what the students' preferences were, which went from at the beginning of the summer to where students were saying, we want to be more face-to-face. We didn't like that online, necessarily everybody. But then by the fall, because of the health issues, a lot of students were saying, maybe we want to not go through that path as eagerly as we thought we would. So where we ended up was about 60% pure online, 20% a mix, and 22% in person. We plan on doing the same for this coming spring semester. Our housing, again, demand specific, we're a little bit less than half our housing, and that's a really important risk mitigation factor for us. I'll talk about testing of COVID in a moment and how well we're doing on that front, but a big factor is we're only about half full. And then, of course, we're keeping our employee population and student population as healthy as possible by really having a lot of social distancing. We've got a whole culture around keeping Panthers safe, and that's the Panthers protecting Panthers. A lot of activities, much around masking, social distancing, a lot of the ways that we have ingress and egress, but really there's a dozen or more different practices. Next slide, please. What's been then the impact? Facilities, a lot of work, as I mentioned, the social distancing, plexiglass. You might have seen some of the social media on this. It's really been extensive how much work we did over the summer. Training and attestation has been critical. Creating a culture of safety and health. I use that phrase an awful lot. It is a mindset, it's behaviors, and it's got to be as much adherence as possible. And we think, based on conversations, not only with the CDC last week as they came and visited campuses in Wisconsin, but working with Dr. Deborah Birx, they really see, the federal government sees campuses as the front line for a lot of communities as being not only safe, but really leading the way as far as testing and best practices. So in many of our communities across the state of Wisconsin, the safest place to be is on our campuses. And that refers to my testing at the bottom. Yesterday, we tested 295 students and employees. We're ramping up at that rate quite admirably. We got funding from the federal government through the CARES Act, and the state of Wisconsin has been able to channel that in to enable us to do antigen testing, which is the asymptomatic approach. And then for symptomatic students or for confirmation of positive antigen tests, we do the PCR test, which is the gold standard. And I'm really happy to report our rates overall generally average in the 2 to 3%. Some days it's up to 4%. Yesterday we had 2% and one employee out of all the folks that we test. So we keep safe. We keep all over this testing as much as possible. When individuals are identified as positive, of course, we have isolation, quarantine facilities, and take care of the dining, take care of making sure that they're getting the help and the support that they need. Next slide, please. So shifting gears. Beyond COVID, what's happening? Well, You see headlines like this every day. I encourage you to take a look at whether it's in the news today, Madison's headline of continuing furloughs through 2021. If you look at the New York Times yesterday and today, you see headlines about budget cuts with nothing left unturned, things that we've never looked at before. You've seen this across higher education in the state of Wisconsin and frankly nationally. So it really is, from the Chronicle, you see this nightmare scenario. Let's talk about why in specific for Wisconsin. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is something that should concern everyone. There's a lot of lines here on this data. I'm just going to kind of stay at a high level. All the major colors, forget about that blue line for a moment, forget about where the red arrow is pointing, just look at the cluster. What the cluster of colors represents is over the last 10 years, what has been the funding for states at regional public universities across the Midwest, as well as a national trend line that cuts through there. So what you see is a general trend line that was a little bit rocky in 2006, 2007, a little bit up and down. It declined, and now it's been going up, but generally pretty, there was a dip through 2011 through 2013. But as you look at this, over a long period of time, you see a pretty good trend line where things are coming back up. The blue line, where there's the big dive, that's everybody knows the story about Illinois. It was well in the paper, and a lot of campuses in Wisconsin benefited from the plight that was going on with funding for higher education in Illinois cratering. And we danced on that grave, so to speak, for a couple of years, where a lot of students were coming to Illinois. Our enrollment growth for a period of 2 or 3 years were doubling from Illinois. It was really a nice thing. But they now have turned a corner significantly and have made some major investments, and students are staying in Illinois. Meanwhile, what's the red arrow about? That's us. And you kind of probably saw that coming. That's the state of Wisconsin. And if you look at this from 2011, 2012, what you see is, in general, a downward trend, a disinvestment in public higher education. And that's the UW system, that's the technical college, and those two together. So this should be concerning to all of us because it represents our future in many ways, not just what Karen was talking about, but I'm going to talk about some very specific issues that do jeopardize and threaten our ability to continue to provide the talent that employers need. And if there's been one thing that employers have said for the last decade is that the biggest challenge is we don't have enough talent at the right time with the right skills. I wrote a column, op-ed, for the Higher Ed Regional Alliance when we first got the group together. And I made a comment, asked 9 out of 10 CEOs what their number one challenge is, and they'll all say the same thing. And then got a lot of nice comments on the article, but the questions I got occasionally were, who's that one CEO who said talent isn't their number one issue? Who could possibly say that? So that's the concern here. What are we going to do to really keep this in check? Next slide, please, Heather. Michelle, thank you. So again, I'm not going to go through, there's a lot of data on this, but what I think is important is if you look at COVID, there's direct impact on finances, and then there's the indirect. The direct, right out of the gate, is we had to give money back when you give half a semester of dining and residence and seg fee fees up. That's a significant financial impact. When you give up the reduced enrollments that come in, when you have less students in housing, when you have increased costs, these things are significant. So we did anticipate in the spring a shortfall of about 15 to 18 million. This is on a budget that's north of 600 million, just to put this in context. This actually, as it turns out, we had about half of that. We were able to get additional funding from CARES, the federal government funding. We gave half of that to students. The other half was allocated to the university. And we were able to trim some expenses better than thought. But for this year, for the fall, we know because of the housing being down, we know because of enrollments, we anticipated that we would be 5 to 10% down. As it turns out, we're a little bit shy of 5% overall enrollments that are down. We're making right now a $30 million budget cut. That's the most important thing. During this year, we had a state budget cut in the previous spring, and we have another one coming this fall. So that, again, is that continued disinvestment. And those are significant challenges. You put that all together. So next slide, please, Michelle. And so financials and COVID aside, what are the other factors that are happening to higher ed? They come down to these 9 major factors, and you could combine some of them and you could sort them out, but these are the big ones. And these are well chronicled, and I'll show you the effects of these in a moment. Civil and social unrest, the protests that have been occurring in communities and across society, those find their way onto campus, and those are understandable completely. Campuses are where a lot of these issues do play out. Political issues, whether it's from executive orders that do this, or because of certain Department of Education factors that do that. There's a lot of different things that are always happening at the political level, as well as state support. And you can appreciate the different dynamics that have been in play. And I'm not making a comment about Democrat or Republican. We have had political whether it's a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, we have had cuts to our higher education budget going back to Tommy Thompson era, where starting after that, we really saw some cuts in our state budget for higher ed. Completion rates, as I mentioned earlier, and achievement gap, those two are a little bit different. The achievement gap is the difference that we have across different student segments in our state. And then the completion rates are the fact that we don't graduate nearly enough students that start college for a variety of different reasons, but those are major issues that contribute to the college debt, which is also found in this list. Support for growing numbers of disadvantaged students. We need to have greater financial support, and I'm really pleased about our recent campaign that I know fellow Rotarian and our Vice Chancellor, Patricia Borger, helped us drive our record-setting $250 million campaign that has been first and foremost about student support, and we give an awful lot of support for our underrepresented students. Societal views on the value of college degree is all over the map today. If you look at the Pew survey research on this, majority of Americans, Democrat and Republican, think higher education is going the wrong way. Part of it is because of college debt. Part of it is because of a lack of alignment with employer needs. And I want to tell you that in this region, I am joined with so many of our higher ed counterparts that are doing great things to make sure we've got better alignment in those areas. Employer needs is really what I just spoke about. And then the demography is an interesting one because as I often like to say in colleges, we're running out of teenagers. And that's well documented. I can show you the books, show you the data, but essentially 18 to 25-year-olds are a declining portion of our population. So that's a factor that makes us all, if I can be euphemistic, we can all be hungrier. We're all more competitive with respect to students. So next slide, please. What does that mean? Bringing it down to the key drivers here. The major issues, and this is brand new, this slide is new as of last week, and this is from the American Council on Education fall survey and examination of what's happening across campuses. Take a look at the top, figure 1, most pressing issues facing college presidents and chancellors due to COVID in this fall. Mental health of our students. Everybody has had this issue for a long time. There's been a lot of insecurities, but it's especially acute right now. Mental health issues because of all the uncertainty in life, employment, the food insecurity, mental health, these things all contribute. Long-term financial viability, this is existential. Again, this is not like academic, oh, nice to know. These are some trends that might affect you. This is real. You do not get these kinds of statements and headlines. You're not hearing the kind of numbers that I'm talking about in the abstract. This is quite real. These are people's lives, jobs, our students at stake. Mental health for faculty and staff. I had a report from a scenario planning work group this morning. The chronic issue that comes up in survey and interview across the board is how tired our employees, how tired our students are. And this is not unique to UWM. This is a chronic vexing issue. Then enrollment numbers for the spring, as I've been forecasting, online learning, how do we best sustain that? So those are some of the big ones, but then drop to the bottom. What does that mean? Just like we saw announced by Madison today, hiring freezes, freeze on employee compensation, salary increases, renegotiating contracts, and especially furloughs. We're contracting, we're trimming. We have reduced over the last 5 years, our faculty headcount alone is reduced north of 20%. It's very hard to maintain the education and the research missions when you're doing that. So next slide, please. As we turn to what we're doing, and we look at the future, and I want to build in here some of the things UWM is doing in response. Academic enterprises for survival, for thriving, sustainable futures, really need to recognize the road ahead is going to continue to be rough. The trends, while oftentimes we talk internally, and at your organizations, you probably talk about from a health and public safety, kind of in 3-month increments. Where will we be by, end of the year? Where will we be by end of spring? How about end of summer as we break the year down? The changes that I'm talking about, the higher ed issues, are chronic and long-term. They're well beyond the 3-month type of thinking. So we have to recognize the turbulence that's in front of us. COVID is one part of it, but really what's the right way to look at the academic enterprise from a responsible, sustainable enterprise? How are we structured? How are we built? If we were to build UWM, much like we were to build, whether it's private institutions or the UW system or the tech college system today, how would we be operating? And I think we really have some major questions at a strategic level we need to look at. And of course, every campus is looking at this very much concerned with themselves, but we're also doing some higher level planning as well. So the academic enterprise very much at risk. We need to have strong, steady hands, long-term vision. Under student experience, the issues in front of us today are there's so much uncertainty, as you can appreciate from our students' perspective, and we've got to continue to do everything we can to use technology to create the intimacy, the relationships, the bonding that happens. And students are giving us a lot of credit. We're doing that in a much better way. And I'm very, very glad that we have some leading national experts that help us with respect to how we best go online, and not just go online flipping a switch, but how qualitatively better we go online than what we were trying to do in the past, and how we improve and continue to move that up, because that's going to be the differentiator. It's not just a binary switch. And then how we work with you all, from internships and coordinating things virtually to work with the great employers in Milwaukee to help continue to keep those relations as strong as we can. So we do things with the Commons, we do things with GMC and MMAC and M7 in terms of partnerships that make that happen. Then business models for higher ed, new revenue models. What's the right size? What's the way that we structure this? We're not going back to normal. I told our folks, and I've got a town hall with a campus this afternoon, we are not next fall going to be back to normal. Even if the world is back to normal, we're online in a much larger percentage than we ever would have imagined. We're going to be restructuring a number of different parts of our organization, including how I organize my senior leadership team. We're just going to have to really look at a lot of new aspects in terms of what's the right approach. And then finally, enrollments. In part, sure, there's the competition and demographics, but there's a lot of other factors as well. And it's not just around 4-year degree, 2-year degree, and graduate degrees anymore. We have to think better, and we are doing a lot, especially through the Higher Ed Regional Alliance and our Tech Ed Forum, around micro-credentialing, badging, putting degrees into smaller portions where you get what you need when you need it in a virtual way, supplemented by coaches, supplemented by additional learning. So those are some of the things that we're doing and really ambitious to move ahead. Final slide, please, Michelle. So standing back, looking at UWM specifically, I would argue, and I think you generally agree, that the types of contributions that we have made pre and in the pandemic world is how critical we are to restarting and keeping Wisconsin's economy strong. The number that I shared at the outset, I think is a pretty good fact to rely upon. 191,000 individuals. And what we've done is we have really tried to align a lot of the work in the curriculum and academic areas around the greatest needs. What are the fastest growing jobs? What are the areas of greatest need? And that's what we've been able to report and show, is that north of 75 to 80% of our graduates go into those high demand, fast growth areas. So that's really an important point. Then separately, taking as an access university, looking at individuals who wouldn't have the doors open, looking at individuals who simply have plateaued or wouldn't have the education from an access perspective to be able to go into employment situations where they wouldn't have had those opportunities without that. On the innovation front, I've talked about some of the research applications, but I really think our future here is in partnerships, working both with higher ed institutions, but also employers in terms of fitting solutions to problems that they have. whether it's around environmental issues, manufacturing, talent, the newest innovation in R&D types of applications, name the issues. As a research university, creating those partnerships and forging a strong economy, providing the talent to then build the products, that's critical. And of course, research is underpinning all of this. This is our DNA and what we absolutely do. So I also, as a final comment, would mention again, when we think about contributions, when we think about philanthropic support, when we think about the higher levels of engagement in civic activities, volunteerism, on all those dimensions, the higher the education, the more that you get in terms of individuals giving back. Wouldn't that be something that we'd all want for all of our citizens across the region, across the state and beyond? So with that, I want to thank you again for your engagement. I see there's already some great questions coming in, and I'll address those as they've come in one at a time. So thanks again, and let's take a look at some of the questions.
And Mark, I'll read them for you if that's okay.
Perfect.
And I guess I just had one question I wanted to start with, which is that I was really almost taken aback by looking at the two of the top three challenges that people in your position are facing have to do with the mental health of your students and your faculty, which I can imagine was not on the top three last year. How are you handling that? I mean, that's got to just be an incredible pressure / opportunity.
So
that wasn't on the books.
Thanks, Mary. It is one of those changes that we did not have this. I will tell you, mental health issues for students have been growing for years, but for the faculty and staff, it had not been that high. I'm starting the town hall this afternoon talking about our employee assistance program, the types of categories, the types of issues, the types of support that we provide, as well as on-campus resources. With student town halls and working closely with our student governance, we're getting the word out even better to the types of things that our Norris Health Center can do. But I have to tell you, campuses across the state, and I think every one of my colleagues would agree that's on the call today, and anybody who's in a leadership role in student affairs would tell you that this has been a breaking point for campuses for some time. When you put together the food insecurity, the employment issues and things, even before the pandemic, college students had tremendous needs. So we're doing a lot, and this is where like our emergency funds have come in. I'm really proud of the Chancellor Student Success Fund. I looked at this and I said, I need to do more. So my wife and I stepped up and we started $1 million campaign, and we're well on our way down that. We've had technology support, we've had food insecurity support, as well as other provisions that have gone really quickly. And boy, those funds go immediately. The lines are long. So we're trying to swarm, if you will, right on those particular issues. So it's not going to be easy. Those are not flip a wand and it's over.
Right.
These are some real challenging issues. It also speaks to why we really do need to have breaks and not try to jam everything in short semesters, but take the spring, take the Thanksgiving, have the good winter breaks to give our folks the time off.
Okay, here's a question. Given the COVID-related challenges, demographic trends, and financial pressures, how many of the 4,300 higher education institutions in the USA may not survive in your best guess, looking at the crystal ball here?
You know, a year and 2 years ago, before the pandemic, we were seeing that the sustainability of higher education business models was not very strong. And we saw these trend lines happening, and COVID accelerated all of that. So if you put the number, if I had to hazard a guess, my prediction would be, you know, in a 2 to 4 year period, we could see 10 to 20% of that number of institutions quite easily consolidate, close, go away. I have seen this year more institutions declare financial exigency than I've ever seen before. I see the headlines, you know, on a daily basis. Many of you do too. I just don't think we can build this. And I think that the right question that leads from that is, what's the right number and the right types of academic institutions for the world that we have today? And then let's think strategically about that. But yeah, the numbers are challenging. I can't be probably more precise or specific than that,
Sure.
but I'd put a number in a 10 to 20%. Some have been more conservative. I have to tell you, there's some pundits out there that would say 25% in 2 or 3 years will be under. I mean, that's what some people would predict. I'm not that.
Okay, no, that's good. Okay, Karen Hung asks, what have been the advantages and results of UWM as a multi-campus institution? And what are the disadvantages of being a multi-campus institution? And I guess just for clarification, this has to do with bringing in Waukesha and, I'm sorry, what's the second campus that you brought in?
UWM Washington County.
In Washington County, okay.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Karen. You know, on the advantage side, first of all, the neat thing about an access institution is that with two-year colleges, you have half the price point. So you have much more access, and to be able to onboard students that can come to UWM in a more streamlined way, working through all the transfer issues, having them part of UWM really solves a lot of issues. So that's a huge, probably one of the biggest pluses. I think having opportunities to have a platform to build four-year degrees that include business. I'm glad Dean Chari is on, because he knows and he's been part of this. We're first bringing four-year programs to those academic institutions. So like nursing is the first one out. We've got some business, later some engineering. So think about Waukesha County, 400,000 people that don't have a four-year academic institution, has a great array of offerings across all those areas. Don't get me wrong, Carroll University, wonderful program, but doesn't have the complete array of graduate offerings and other things that we can build on what they're doing. We can work closely with WCTC, Moraine County Technical Park. So those are some of the pluses. One other plus, the political support. Milwaukee historically has been very democratic. We now have in the backyards incredible representatives from the Republican side who have been able to be more bipartisan in terms of our support. That was a big factor for us in the budget last year. So those are pluses. The downside, the two-year campuses brought with them, and I think there's no secret about this, it was very public, they had enrollment declines that ranged from 35 to 53% across the 13 two-year institutions. Think about that for a moment, 35 to 52% over the previous 7 or 8 years. They were hemorrhaging. And so we've got financial headaches that are a big challenge for us with those two-year campuses. But they have quality faculty, quality staff, great students, and really opens up some neat opportunities for us. But short-term, major strategic and financial questions to get through.
Alex Chu asks, could UW system alumni create a lobbying organization to support more state funding? And have you heard anything spoken about that?
Madison has an alumni group that does that. Other campuses are doing that in different ways. So we have, for example, the Panther promoters, and I'm really proud of the work that they have done to really help with that. You have a number of Rotarians that are involved there, from the kinds of work that Carl Miller and Jill Pelisek and Chris Fiasca and a number of others, Lori Craig, have just been super helpful. So from a UWM perspective, they are active lobbying. I know Pat Cronin is on the call. He's been very active. So wonderful supporters to do that. As far as a UW alumni overall, I don't know. I don't think there's an entity that exists at that level, but that's something that you've asked the question. I'm going to pursue that and think about that. We need the advocacy and the lobbying in a big way. So every idea like that, I'm going to suggest that Panther promoters think about how we join forces with other alumni groups. So I like the idea. Thank you, Mr. Chow, for that.
Yeah. Well, on a lighter note, and speaking of the Panthers, I was driving down Lincoln Memorial last week behind a car whose license plate was Panther. Is that you?
I have dual Panther ovals. You'll always know my car because I've got dual Panthers, but I do have a license plate, but it doesn't have Panther 1.
Okay.
I want to get that. Yeah.
I don't know who has that. Okay, I was wondering. We were trying to get ahead of the car to see who was driving it, and we couldn't. Okay, from Mark Stoddard, with the ever-increasing stress on higher education budgets and the pressure, as you know, to match education with employer needs, what do you see as the risk that UW-Milwaukee will become mostly a place for vocational training and no longer a place where young people can learn the things that in a deeper way can prepare them for life, not just for jobs?
That's a great question. And I'm always cognizant, I'm an English major originally, and I know the value of humanities, liberal arts, and the sciences and social sciences. My own wiring is such that we will not be, and the campus is not going to be a vocational technical school in any way, in large part because we have the first 2 years that require 60 credits of what we call general education requirements. So students are required to go through courses that do give them founding and grounding for life. If we lose sight of this, if we do go to whether it's the 2-year model or the German model or where we're totally industry based, if we forget about that, then we're going to chase jobs that may be important in 3 years or 5 years and we're suited. But then when the world changes, our students are out of luck. They're needing to be reskilled and retooled. Instead, I think we have to do a better job of taking those first 2 years of education and demonstrating competencies around critical thinking, effective communication skills, teams, and working in ways that individuals can think strategically, appreciate history, see around corners, really have reflection capabilities, whether it comes from philosophy, understanding the role of archaeology and history, or dance, a variety of different things can build that whole person. That to me is the foundation that UW-Milwaukee will never lose. That's not just part of my commitment as a 31-year veteran of UW-Milwaukee, and hopefully not that many going forward, but certainly some direction going forward. That's really an important part of our DNA. So that's my hopefully assurances to you about that particular issue.
Okay, Bob Poussant is asking about the focus that UWM has on supporting veterans and what you might like to tell us about that.
That's a great question, and thanks, Bob. Bob and I have done some great work. Bob's an incredibly important strategic thinker and somebody who helped start a program with me that we hoped over 20 years ago would become the legacy that it is today, called our strategic management series. That really has a wonderful track record of educating thousands of individuals in executive ed format. And Bob, on the veteran front, I'm happy to report that our veteran enrollment, despite enrollment declines, has actually grown this year. And we're still close to 1,100 veterans, which is almost twice as many as any 4-year academic institution in a 6-state region. We are far and away the leading educator, and it's not accidental. It's just like we attained 2 weeks ago, top 30 LGBT campus status, LGBT friendly status for probably the 4th year in a row. And these are not accidental. These are dedicated. We have the Military and Veterans Resource Center. We've got dedicated staff. We've got one of the only relationships with a full-time VA representative who's on campus, who comes in and works in support and does a lot of advising. We do a lot of things with veterans' mental health. There's specific activities that we've worked with that audience for many, many years. And I'm proud to say this goes back to the 1960s when a lot of campuses were not as supportive. This is a long-time legacy at UW-Milwaukee, and we're fiercely proud of it, just like we are all dimensions of diversity that we so much want to uphold. It's one of our great strengths. Not that we do everything perfect, but we are working on those areas for improvement wherever we can.
Well, thank you for that. And your colleague, Mount Mary President Christine Farr says, thank you, Mark, for representing HERA and higher education in Southeastern Wisconsin so very well.
Well, you know, Christine is a special partner. She leads some of the work in an important way. Just to reflect really quickly, HERA has 3 goals. The Higher Ed Regional Alliance has 3 goals. Number 1, college completion. Number 2, greater interaction and collaboration among higher eds. And number 3, better linkages between higher ed and employers. Christine, with John Walls, leads goal 2, which is around this work on the collaboration that we're doing among higher ed, and 2 manifestations of that everybody should be aware of. Number 1 is the ability for students to transfer across our institutions has long been an obstacle. A lot of students might want to start at a WCTC or Gateway Tech or MATC thinking, I only need 2 more years after I'm done to become a nurse or a police officer or an engineer. And they find a roadblock. They can't do that. They might want to be a star architect like Darren, thinking they get 2 years out of the way. It doesn't work a lot of times because we don't have the transfer linkages figured out. It's really neat how Christine and John have led our groups to be able to figure that out, not only for this region, but really being a tail on a larger dog to bring the technical college, privates, and UW system all together with a number of different things. The other one is on the micro-credentialing. You can't do that. No one institution can do that at scale. But together, through a lot of the work that Christine and John are leading, it's powerful what we're able to do together. So we've got some neat pilots in place and look forward to having more opportunities for educating your workforce right away. So thanks for the shout out, Christine, and back to you.
Mark, what is micro-credentialing?
Micro-credentialing is taking something that is essentially a certificate. It takes a degree and brings it down into the different components.
Okay.
So let me give you an example. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is something where you can get a credential in, and then you can get pieces within that. So the micro-credentials all build, we call these stackable certificates, and they're what employers increasingly want people to have, because you don't have to go to college for the entire degree. You can get it. So this might have started with, think of girls who code camps, or think about, these coding places. Well, you can get certificates, but then when you can start building those, depending on how macro or micro, you can have those in just little pieces or large pieces, depending on what employers need and depending on where employers are at. So what we're increasingly seeing is savvy employers have what's called digital fitness. They give you a test in terms of your competencies in different areas, and then you can have a micro credential or a piece of a degree that comes and fits into that.
Thank you. Okay. And from Barbara Velez, what progress has UWM made toward being named a Hispanic serving institution by the U.S. Department of Education? And is there a target date for earning this designation?
Well, thank you, Barbara, for that question. That's critically important. We have had our HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution Initiative. We're making progress. We're probably at 12% today on our goal to 25%. When we get to 15%, that will be an important designation. Our goal would be between 2025 and 2030 to be able to achieve that status. Keep in mind that at UWM, the number of Hispanic students, just because of our size, some smaller institutions have moved up and can go faster because the numbers are quite a bit smaller for us. We're already educating. I think the Hispanic population is probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 1,700 students, which is substantial compared to where we were, and we want to keep that growing. As you all know, demographically, that's a really important part of our community. But what we also know is, based on work that has been done by the Hispanic professionals of Greater Milwaukee, we know that Hispanics are underrepresented in professions under $40,000. And I'm sorry, they're overrepresented and they're underrepresented in occupations above that. So when we think about management, think about accounting and engineers and leadership types of positions in organizations, we have to use education to really help change that situation. We really need to elevate the employment levels and the income levels within this, and that's where the HSI is vitally important. And this is not to say that among Native Americans or African Americans or any other group that they're not important. We're really trying to raise the boats for all our students, and that's what's important. We can't just focus on just one student population. We've got a lot of students. We want all of them to be successful together. But HSI is a critically imperative strategic direction for me and for the campus.
Thank you. And we probably have time for two more questions, which is good because I see two questions in the chat that I haven't asked yet. So from John Hine, are there studies on the number of students who have opted to take a year off and start the next year fresh, and how well they do? Is that proven to be a good strategy? Is there any information about that?
I'm not aware of studies on that yet, because this is the first fall that we've had this opportunity in mass. We've always had some students who take gap years, and I'm not familiar with that research. Here's what I can tell you. What we do know is we have enough data. We should be able to figure that out. Nationally, you might have seen the Wall Street Journal article in the last week or two that had the headline, college enrollment among freshmen are down 16% nationally. At UWM, we're tracking right along with that. Our enrollment for freshmen are down about 15%. Returning student enrollments across the UW system is higher, but freshmen are generally down. So the other comment that I'd make on that is we know that there's great uncertainty. There's great questions about distance and safety and things like that. We think that everything we're doing is spot on to really continue to encourage students to come back. But over time, we'll have more information on that. I would point out, and just something to think about, what we know, and if you talk to Vicki Martin, she can tell you what a year out of college does in terms of lifetime income. She's got those numbers at her fingertips for a 2-year degree. I can tell you what we know is that lifetime earnings from 4-year degrees are $1 million income differential. That still is robust today, and it's even more important in the uncertain world where we know education is going to continue to provide the necessary knowledge and tools. So no answers on that yet, but those are some thoughts.
Thank you, Mark. And then we'll close with another question from Karen Hung, who's our champion question putter out there. I like the UWM focus to be I like that the UWM focus is market and community centric. I also appreciate the innovation given constraints and crisis. How else do you anticipate higher education to be disrupted? Educational institutions are morphing. Competitors are now both traditional and non-traditional.
In a word, Karen, you won't find this a surprise. Partnerships, collaboration, doing it with others. And I'm so proud that we have in this region so much collaboration going on. I just give credit to my colleagues, the trust that we've built, the partnerships, the work that's underway for us to be able to work with the privates across the region and the publics in the 2 years. That to me is important, but we've also got to make sure that employers through our industry forum are aligned and arranged in a way that's beneficial for them. I do think when you collaborate and you partner, there's always the risk in the beginning to have everybody trying to do everything. And so having coherence, having a good plan, and then working with that. Right now, we're in a bit of obviously COVID threw everything up in the air, but we saw with the arrival of Foxconn, and of course it hasn't played out as it was promised. It may still at some point, but we knew the issues upon this region were so immense, we had to come together. That brought us to some good things. And now we have other challenges and we've got a great foundation. So to me, it's collaboration and partnership. And I think all my colleagues would agree. And I hope that at Rotary, just given the strength of what you represent as such a great collaborative organization that gets behind and supports so many important initiatives in the city and larger region, this is what you'd expect from UWM as the role that we have played and want to continue to play, as Dean Kaushal has said, from an engaged university, from an access, and really given our platform to have an obligation and a commitment to do more for the region.
Well, thank you, Mark, for a very, very helpful and informative presentation and very engaging. And thank you for being a Rotarian. And I'm going to turn this back to Darren, who will close out the program.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Chancellor Mone, for being here today. As you know, in honor of members, community leaders like yourself who speak to our club, we'll be making a donation in your name to the YWCA of Southeastern Wisconsin, whose mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, promoting peace, justice, and dignity for all. Remember to join us virtually this Thursday over the lunch hour when Andrew Hunt, Director of the Center for Real Estate at Marquette University, will discuss the impact of COVID-19 on real estate. And just a quick couple of notes on our upcoming Tuesday programming. Next Tuesday, November 3rd, is Election Day. We will not be having a program on that day, so we ask that you take the extra time to get out and vote. Join us on November 10th as we welcome Lafayette Crump, the new Commissioner of City Development for the City of Milwaukee. And Mark, please know that you and your health will certainly be in the thoughts and prayers of all your friends here at Rotary. Thank you all for being here today. This meeting is adjourned.